Begin with the first statement tonight.
Hello. Everybody here all right back there? Yes? Okay. A minute goes by very quickly, so I'm going to go through this. One of the most important issues that's facing the future of Anniston is a vision that's combined. It includes the school board. It includes all the council members. That vision is going to really be which way we go for the long term. It needs to be documented. And in that way, whenever we do make decisions, we have meetings, we can bounce those off that vision and we'll all keep in the same track. To get there, we need a strategy. The strategy is going to be a roadmap. How do we do this? So in all these decisions, it's got to include the vision. That vision will encompass communication of the council members, our education, our existing businesses, new businesses, consequently, new hires. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins.
Are you insane? What are you thinking? My congratulations and my condolences. These are the words that I heard from my family and friends following my appointment to the city council. And yet I couldn't help but hearken back to a quote given to me by my father, who said, "The only thing necessary for a city to fail is for good men to do nothing." Well, I did something. And in doing something have brought civility and professionalism back to the council. In the 6 months I've been privileged to serve you, we have created a commercial development authority, a new planning and economic development department, stabilized the police and fire retirement fund, found funding and begun to work on the development of extending Ladiga Trail into downtown, created policies to encourage bike and pedestrian infrastructure, and stop the petty argument. This is a beginning, but only a beginning. I need your vote to continue these efforts for the next 4 years. Thank you.
We have a number of general questions, but we have two very specific to Ward 1, so I'm going to begin with them. And Mr. Jenkins will take this question first. There's a statement here, burned houses need to be torn down. There's a statement that there's one on McCall Avenue and one on Crescent. Both have been this way for over 3 years. So the question is, what do you do about abandoned, burned houses within this ward?
The first step in that is reporting that to city authorities. Tana Bryant is our inspection department code enforcement officer. She will receive the complaint, make efforts to find the appropriate owner of the property, which is legally required, provide contact to that property owner, give them the opportunity to correct the situation. Their failure to correct the situation results in a summons for action by the council, and then a lien is ultimately placed on that property if no action is taken, and the city removes it.
Thank you. Mr. Hatton, the same question. What do you do about the burned houses, the dilapidated, abandoned houses in the ward?
Okay, there is a procedure in place. There are laws that you have to follow because this is private property. And the first area of concern should be the safety aspect. In terms of, is it creating a hazard the way it sits? The insurance company, if one exists, they need to be involved. The agent. And if those things are not happening, the city really needs to look at the safety parts of it. What does it do to the neighborhood? And put that on a case-by-case basis in terms of priority for eliminating that problem.
Thank you. And now this question will go to you first, Mr. Hadley. For a couple of years, our neighborhood of Rocky Hollow and Thomas Avenue has been subjected to drug dealing and drive-by shootings, loud noises all night long, etc. We are scared for our lives. What are you going to do differently in the future to get results and give us our neighborhood back?
Okay, that's kind of close to home. Years ago, Margaret and I were in a similar situation. Not that critical, but it was close. And the problem with having that going on is you can't regulate it 24 hours a day. And to find the root problem is going to take some police effort. It's going to take neighbors that are willing to indicate and talk with the police. It's not a case where you can fix it easily, because the city has some problems with drugs, and they don't go away, except you got to concentrate on those areas. And it starts probably with the schools. We need to start going backwards and finding out who's involved and what do we do to keep them from getting involved in the first place. And then long-term wise, we'll eventually be able to solve that. And of course, having jobs is another indicator. Because if you have a job, you're probably not going to be able to be out there with the drugs.
All right, thank you. Mr. Jenkins, the same question. This is about the Rocky Hollow and Thomas Avenue neighborhood specifically, but what do you do about the drug dealers, the drive-by shootings, and those problems?
I am painfully familiar with the situation there. I've met with more than one resident in that neighborhood regarding this concern. The police have increased patrols in that area and are doing their best effort at curbing the activity. Unfortunately, what we're finding out is that the individuals involved understand the law well enough, just well enough to skirt it and limit the activity that we can do. We are working diligently to solve the problem. I do believe there's an end in sight for those residents. I've expressed that to them. I agree with Mr. Hadley that the first step in all of that, good neighborhoods are found by good neighbors. We must get out there, we must get to know each other. I've distributed some literature in that neighborhood to a number of folks that expresses a similar situation in Kansas City, where the neighborhood decided that they had enough and they took their neighborhood back, and the neighborhood went from crime-ridden to one of the most desired neighborhoods in the city. There is a solution there, but it does involve police and the community. It must involve the residents as well, though. They have to report the problem. We don't, unfortunately, we don't have many that are. And the ones that are, when you speak with them, are scared. Rightfully so. We've got to group together. We've got to come to a solution, and I've expressed my willingness to lead that charge.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. This next question goes to you first. What will you do about the ongoing animal problems in this area? Strays, dogs that are chained up 24 hours a day, etc.
There are a number of laws in place for that. In fact, I've been asked just recently what is the limit of animals that one individual can have in their property. There used to be a law on the books that restricted us to 4 dogs, and specifically per residence. That has to do with a number of health issues, but also noise. That law is no longer active, as I understand it. It applies really only to kenneling and breeding components at this point. I'd like to see us bring something similar to that back so that we can maintain control. It's not fair to the animal, and it's not fair to the neighbor.
Thank you. Mr. Hadley, the same question for you. How do we deal with the ongoing animal problems, such as strays and dogs that are chained up 24 hours a day?
Okay, one at a time. It's not the total answer, but it's a beginning. Education. A lot of individuals don't understand the spay and neuter program. You have to stop having those baby pets to start with. Then you can control the population. And I've learned a lot from my wife Margaret on this issue. And believe me not being a cat person, that was a really education. But it makes sense. If you don't have more babies, you don't have more to worry about. There is a safety issue and a health issue. So I think the city needs to always be up front and foremost in the important areas of health and safety to make sure that those areas are being cleaned up, regulated. Sometimes maybe an owner may have too many pets, maybe get out of hand, and they may need help in order to get regulation in these areas. But the one-on-one treatment of pets is the way we solve this problem, and we have to educate people in terms of how to do that. And we start again in the schools. The younger you start, the better it is.
Thank you very much. And this next question we're going to do this to happen. By being elected to the council, what would you do, what would you bring to the table to unite our great city?
We need communication. Communication not only among ourselves as neighbors, communications with your council person. We need communication at the council level. And that communication has to be open. All of us have to have some common goal that we're pursuing. If all the individuals in this room were to recognize a common vision and a common goal, it'd be a lot easier to communicate, wouldn't it? And so that communication is the key. And communication involves not only talking, but listening. And in between, you have to understand what those words are. All of us have different backgrounds, maybe different languages, but we have to learn to communicate.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins, if you're put back on the council, what do you bring to the table to unite our great city?
We are all unique. We come from different backgrounds, different educations, different social statuses, different economic times. It is incumbent upon us to listen to one another, to hear what each has to offer, to recognize that everybody has value, that everybody has a good idea, that we must learn from one another, we must listen to one another, and we will come to a collective solution. If you look at the Get Moving survey that was done, if you read through that, when you find that it was 100 individuals from each of the 4 wards, from a broad range of backgrounds, what you find in that is 75% on every question asked, 75% of the folks want the exact same thing. It doesn't matter where we come from, it doesn't matter where we live or how we live, we all want the same quality of life. It's up to us to listen to each other and work together to achieve that. Thank you.
I'm going to split this next question into 2 parts. Mr. Jenkins, you'll go first on this part. How would you develop downtown Anniston?
It has to start with a conversation. We've got to bring the stakeholders to the table. We have 60% vacancy in our downtown core. That's unacceptable. I think that's unacceptable to everybody in the room. We've got to engage in a conversation with the stakeholders, the Spirit of Anniston, the Historic Preservation Commission, the merchants, the individuals beyond that. Everybody must play a role in coming to a solution. What would I like to see downtown? I'd like to see better businesses, more business downtown. I'd like to see us improve the parking. I'd like to see the development of an entertainment zone. I'd like to see a real honest incentive program to encourage folks to redevelop their vacant buildings downtown, and a punishment that comes along with that for the folks that refuse to take care of their buildings. We've got to work together and create a viable, interested community for that. I'd love to see cultural development in that area.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Hadley, what would you do to develop downtown Anniston?
Okay, downtown has got a lot of unique businesses. There's taverns, there's restaurants, there's specialty shops. There's some strengths already downtown. There are still some vacancies. So I would very much recommend that we concentrate on the strengths we have, look at what it takes to improve that, how do we support those owners and business people already there. And then we also need to kind of go out of this box and look at what other cities have done. Gadsden, Gunnersville, Rome, Georgia. They've done some unique things that maybe would help us recognize what direction we could take. But by all means, we have to make sure we support our existing businesses and make the working ability with the city as easy as possible. And that works for new businesses. We've got consultants that we can call. We're not the only ones that have this dilemma in the United States. There's a lot of cities do the same problem solving. And we need to include the council. The council needs to meet with the business owners on a periodic basis and find out what do we need to do, not only for the city, but what do we need to do for the surrounding area and businesses. We have standalone companies, businesses, We have other malls that may be empty. So the more people we get to Anniston, the better it's going to be for downtown. And it's been said, basically, and it's true. Retail goes to where the people are. People do not go where the retail is. You have to have the people first. So we need to build out Anniston, increase the population, have more individuals down there, have more events, and Anniston as a whole will benefit from that.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Hadley, the second part is also, you get to start with this. How would you develop the land that used to be Fort McClellan? As the Ward 1 representative, you have the unique prospect of representing that area. So how do we develop the McClellan area?
Okay, McClellan is probably one of the largest areas in Alabama that a city has had possession of. There are many places that would love to have that amount of land and those facilities there. We have to be very careful to do this one pace at a time. And I mentioned us having a vision. That vision needs to include economic development and businesses. So following that plan, we need to utilize the individuals that are already out there. The McClellan Development Authority, they're already in place. There's very competent board of directors that push that staff to what they're doing. So I think, first of all, we need to probably support them and make sure that Anniston provides the resources they need in order to pursue what they've already learned is going to take for us to improve that property and sell it. It won't happen overnight, but it can happen one section at a time. I still got extra time. That bag right there was all the data that's been generated so far. It was downsized to the flyer that you got from the newspaper. And then from the newspaper, we got down to these cards. So it's a lot of information that I think all the candidates have had to absorb and talk about. And hopefully we're going to give you the information you need so you can make the best decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Mr. Jenkins, now the same question to you. As the Ward 1 council member, what would you do? What are your ideas about developing the McClellan property?
I agree with Mr. Hadley. We need to show greater respect for the McClellan Development Authority. The city needs to quit looking at the Development Authority as an outside entity and instead look at them as partners in the development of McClellan. They have done, and the Development Authority has done an outstanding job of stepping out and generating a master plan for an industrial park and a research and technology park out there. They've taken the next step of having construction documents completed and ready to release for bid. It is time that the city and the MDA and the county and the surrounding municipalities bound themselves together and generate the necessary revenue through bond issues or other means to fully develop both of those parks so that we have a plug-and-play environment, if you will, that will allow for developers who are interested to come and look at something other than roads that are failing. It is impossible to market that property in its current situation. We need to show them that we as a city are committed to the development of that property, and that they will come. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Jenkins, this next question will start with you. This is the fourth of the ward meetings. We've had very good attendance so far at the various meetings. The public obviously is very interested in what's happening on the city council. If elected, how do you plan to make yourself accessible to your constituents while you're on the council?
I have striven to be accessible every day. Anyone that has talked with me has received a card that's got my personal cell phone on it. Anybody that has sent me an email has received a response. And in most cases, the email response is actually a formal visit to the front door of their residence. I believe that we must reach out. It's not about me. It's about everybody in this room. It's about everybody in this city. It can't be about me. It's got to be about everyone here. If we're not listening to you, if we're not hearing your problems and working to solve them, then we are not doing our job. have found that the small neighborhood meetings seem to generate the most activity. We end up with 30 to 40 individuals that show up for those. It's typically a concentrated issue. I find that I get very honest comments. A lot of times it's not what I want to hear, but they're honest about it. You know where they stand. They know where you stand. It always ends in a good situation.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Happy, the same question to you. How would you make yourself available to your constituents if elected to the council?
Okay, the obvious methods, of course, are phone, email, being able to attend homeowners meetings, the ones that are in existence, initiate neighborhood areas or programs. Birmingham has had this for years. They operate with it in terms of trying to make sure that all the residents have some way of communicating back up to the government. I have a neighborhood area. You can have designated committees, you can have committee chairs. Those committee persons then can come to the ward individuals, provide the information to the ward, that goes to the council. We can also work it the other way. We can provide transportation to the meetings, the council meetings, for those individuals that may not be able to attend without transportation. As a city, we do need to do a better job of advertising what the city is doing, where their meetings are, what the topics are, so that individuals can become acquainted with the city operation and start feeling more warm and comfortable in actually meeting with the individuals. They really need to meet more than with just the ward council person. They need to meet with all the council persons, because as a city, we're going to grow. We won't grow ward by ward. We'll grow by all the wards combined as a city. So we need to make sure that it's citywide.
Thank you. And we'll begin the next question with you, Mr. Patrick. We have a couple of questions about education. This last one I asked to the Board of Education, but really it was directed to the City Council candidates. How would you improve the graduation rate at Anniston High School?
Okay. That's probably one of the most important things this council has to address with the school board. Because our students, middle school, high school, they're the ones that are going to really become our new population. And so we need to make sure that they graduate with a degree that not only allows them to pursue higher education, let's say an academic 4-year degree, at a minimum a 2-year degree, but also skills. They need to learn some sort of skill or technology that allow them to make a living. And in today's world, if you know your car, you can't fix it mechanically like you used to. It's a technology type of event. So we need to make sure that our students know the opportunities that are out there. Most of the technology individuals are making more money than the average person, because most people can't do those things. So technology is very important. In Anniston High School, we need to add those technology courses and programs. We need to do dual enrollment with Gadsden State. Jack State University also has a great program on technology. And that dual enrollment will get them not only started in the skills area, it'll also give them college credit. And Gadsden State has got a good program going. So why not utilize what they're doing, us set up the vocational areas in our school. And I say vocation because of the age bracket that I'm looking at, we all understand vocation. The younger generation understand technology. So technology skills is the way that we need to pursue. That'll get those students directed in an area that'll help them graduate. Then we can concentrate on a smaller pool of students that we need to really help.
Thank you, Mr. Hatley. And now, Mr. Jenkins, the same question. How would you help to improve the graduation rate at Anniston High School?
I think there's 3 pieces there. Number one, City Council and the Board of Education have got to decide to work together for the betterment of all of us. Number 2, we all have to recognize that Ward 4 Forum, if any of you were there, and I know a number of you were, we had the council candidates first. There were 350 people in the room. When the Board of Education candidates took the stage, there were less than 50 people left. Everybody left. What does that tell us? That tells us that we don't find any investment in our school system. We as a community have to decide that we are going to invest in our community system. You cannot sit there in that seat and tell me that because you don't have a child in that school is not yours. It is yours. It affects your property values. It affects the ability to recruit business in here. It affects every single thing that happens in this city. If we don't embrace the school system, if we don't find a way to fund it properly, we will not succeed in anything we are trying to accomplish. The last thing I would like to add is that we need to develop vocational, but I would like to see vocational targeted much like the two-year college system targets folks with workforce development. We have a number of businesses that are growing, that are looking to move into here. We need to partner with those guys. We need to be training our high school students to take those jobs that those companies, Changer and Dresser just came to the council and asked for tax abatements so that they could build new facilities and hire more people. We need to be attaching Changer and Dresser to the school system so that we can have students coming out of high school, because the jobs they're looking for are jobs that high school technically educated students can perform. We need to be able to give those kids that cannot go to college or don't want to go to college a good paying job coming directly out of high school. That is one of the ways we can accomplish that. Thank you.
And Mr. Jenkins, this next question is very specific. Would you, as a councilman, support partnership with the county school technical program that is well established for the Anniston school system to work with, making better use of funding and unifying the surrounding community?
Absolutely. We have 5 school systems in Calhoun County. We have 120,000 people in Calhoun County. There are 120,000 people in the Birmingham City schools. Now, I know Birmingham City Schools is not a shining example of school systems right now. But the answer is not to divide. Divide and conquer doesn't work, okay? We've got school systems that succeed. We've got school systems that don't. We've got to bond together. It's beyond just the school systems. It's got to be the municipalities. It's got to be the counties. It's got to be the region. We can succeed together. We can fail separately. We are failing separately now. We need to find a way to reach together, reach across our lines, swallow our pride, do whatever it takes to move us together collectively.
Thank you. Do you favor a partnership with the county school technical program to work with the city schools for that project?
Most definitely. By partnering with other entities, you're able to be more efficient, more effective, and you can utilize common resources. It makes no sense for 3 schools to all have, let's say, a high-priced machining lab. That lab won't be used 24 hours a day. But if each area of school has a particular skill area or technology, then that can be utilized by all the schools. And that would also include Gadsden State. Ayers Tech has a lot of that stuff already there. So it would make no sense for Anniston High School to build a brand new machine shop if there's already one in place. If it's in the county, you still have to move students back and forth to these areas. Instructors, same thing. It's very difficult to find technical instructors, teachers that can teach these skills. So by utilizing the common lab area, you can also utilize that resource.
Thank you. All right. And the next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Hadley. The revolving loan fund and, let's see, I'll see if I can read this, and trade improvement grant fund begun when Bill Robinson was mayor has been basically halted by the present council. Would you reinstate the revolving loan fund and refund the spirit of Anniston so it can effectively revive downtown Anniston?
I think any time that you're dealing with dollars and cents and money, you have to be very careful about making sure that there's rules and there's individuals responsible that can carry out those rules consistently. It's like a bank. You have to be consistent on who you loan money to, what the resources are going to. Are they going to the right cause? Because if you don't do it correctly, then all of a sudden it fails. And then you may have to stop that funding. But again, those funding requests have to fit within this vision that we're talking about for Anniston. How is that one business that's asking for money going to contribute to that part of town or that section of the city and also contribute toward attaining that vision? And you have to have competent people. And that competent person needs to also be related some way to the city so that they can get an audit trail. And the city, who's already doing the financial aspects of the city, probably needs to be right in the middle of that loan process. And that way you take away the possibility of losing sight of it or someone not knowing where the money's going.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Jenkins, the same question to you. The revolving loan fund that was put in place some years ago and the Spirit of Anniston, do they receive more funding?
Spirit of Anniston's funding has been cut over the last 2 years, as I understand it. I've not been involved in a budget cycle yet. I know it's coming. It has certainly compromised the Spirit's ability to perform a lot of the functions that we have requested of them. I think that there has to be a renewed relationship between the Spirit of Anniston and the City of Anniston. We're working for the same goal. We need to find out how to achieve that best. If it's additional funding, then it needs to be additional funding. As far as the revolving fund loan goes, I am a firm believer in some genuine incentives. The incentives in the past have been buckets of paint. You know, we'll give you some paint if you'll paint your building on Noble Street. That's not enough. I'm going to tell you, I work in the world, in the building construction world. That's not enough to make anybody even raise an eyebrow. It's got to be a real, genuine incentive. Those buildings need real attention. There are beautiful buildings downtown that are falling in on themselves because the owners cannot simply afford or cannot achieve a loan to restore them. And in many cases, they would like to be able to do that. We need to be able to provide them with the necessary incentives. Meridian, Mississippi did a Hope 6 program several years ago. I know Hope 6 is gone now, and it was for housing. But what they did was tear down projects and build 2-story, clapboard-sided, white-columned, porch-front houses. They gave each homeowner that was in the projects at the time $10,000. Gave it to them. $10,000. Here's your loan. If you will volunteer for the city for a period of 5 years and work X number of hours, we'll forgive the $10,000 debt. Otherwise, you had to repay it as a loan. It allowed people to move into those homes. Those homes are still beautiful today. There are solutions out there. We've got to reach out and find them.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. This next question will start with you. As a member of the council, what process would you employ to develop a strategic plan for the city, and who are the stakeholders?
The stakeholders are every single one of us. I believe that we need to find an outside agency to come in to guide us through the process. We have a lot of personalities. We've got a lot of history with not so good relationships between a number of the personalities. We need somebody that is removed from the emotional equation to come in to guide us through this necessary steps, someone that has done this before, someone that understands that the strategic plan is more than about capital improvements. It's about where are we headed as a community. We all have to get involved. We all have to come to the meetings. We have to come to the series of charrettes, the discussion forums, and state what we want to see as cities. We don't all have a great idea, but a lot of us have great ideas in some respect. Some of them are going to get weeded out. You will find a collective mindset if we can come together and discuss it with each other. We have to speak to one another.
Thank you. Mr. Hadley, the same question to you. The process you would employ to develop a strategic plan for the city, and who are the stakeholders?
Okay, we talked about a strategic plan being a roadmap. It's really the way we're going to get to where we want to go. Those things take time. They take competent people. They take experience. And they take all of us. And the wards are set up so there's a communication link between the residents, citizens, and the council. And that link needs to be worked in terms of up and down. We need to have the best people available that know business, be part of a committee that looks at this vision, decides what is good for Anniston, what will work for all of Anniston, and what will work in the new technology era that we're going into, because it's changing all the time. And that strategy then has to be documented. It has to be passed back and forth between all the different groups, business people already here, the county, you've got McClellan, you've got statewide agencies doing this all the time. There's no reason why Anniston has to stay in a vacuum trying to recruit a business. When we've got county already doing this, we've got McClellan Authority, we've got the state that has 9 agencies, that's all they do is recruit and work with companies to come in or to grow. So we need to really tag on with what's already going on and see how does Anniston fit in to that plan. And then that strategy then can be set up in short, long-term goals. Long-term may be continuous, like in education, that's forever. It just keeps going as it changes. But you got to do the short-term, get those done, they work into the long-term. Again, you got to have the right people, they have to be accountable, and they have to be responsible. And we need to have some way of transitioning from those groups' feedback so we can make changes as we need to as the changes go around us.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. We also have a question from the audience about the new 1-cent sales tax. About half of it has been already set aside for the police and fire pension fund. Mr. Hadley, what are your priorities for the rest of that money, which has been estimated at around $2 million per year?
Okay, this is a pretty important, in fact, a very important ingredient in our government. 1 penny tax has now been added. We are the same as the surrounding areas. Before we had that 1 penny, we had a 1 penny advantage. It would be like you find a quarter on the floor as you're walking somewhere, wouldn't you pick it up? Yes? Okay, that 1 penny is roughly $25 worth of purchases. Wouldn't you rather go to the Lowe's here in Anniston or Walmart and save that quarter? People do coupons all the time to save those pennies. So that penny sales tax is a big issue. And if there was no way to rescind it, then we need to make sure we use that money very wisely. It doesn't become just part of the operating expense for the city. And to do that, we need to look at economic development and revenue streams increasing. By increasing the revenue streams, then you can then look in the future and says, when can we take this penny back off of ourselves? Because the revenue will take over where that penny tax leaves off. And that's one of the important issues we need to look at is this financing, because it's dollars and cents. I'd like to see us go back and have a little advantage so that individuals will go to our stores here for that 1 penny difference. Because 1 penny over a year's period of time adds up. And as people start thinking about this, why would you want to go out of town if you can save a penny here in town? And for businesses that are not national, it's even more important. Walmart's going to get that money whether it's in Anniston or Oxford. But local stores don't have that luxury. So we need to get that advantage back and make sure all that money goes to economic development. And it's part of that vision we talked about.
Thank you, Mr. Tapper. Mr. Jacobs, same question. What are your priorities for the other half of that penny sales tax?
It's a little more than a half. 1.7 goes to shore up the police and fire retirement fund, which was a necessary component. I think we can all agree. My plans and my proposal were to take that money and use it just as the resolution required. Economic development, infrastructure, and education. I'd like to take a portion of it and spend it on infrastructure development for the industrial parks and the research and technology parks. That's one of our greatest opportunities for generating additional revenue streams within the city. I'd like to take a solid portion of it and work with the school system in their efforts to consolidate and provide them the necessary funding to achieve their end goals from a capital standpoint, and then beyond that from an operational standpoint. The remaining dollars I'd like to see go back into our reserve accounts, which we've borrowed from the last few years just to make the budget solvent. It was a necessary item. The one thing I'll point out in all of that is since April, the income that's generated is just right as it was projected. It projected to generate about $4 million, a little more than $4 million a year. It's projecting right along that line. It has not driven our merchants, our individuals, our citizens from shopping anywhere other than they currently were. It has not changed shopping patterns in any way. Piedmont has it, Jacksonville has it, Oxford has it, the county has it. It was time for us to take advantage of that too. We have very low property taxes here. We have very few sources for revenue. This was an opportune moment and we seized it.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Now we're going to call the organization representatives up here for their questions. We're going to begin this time with the real men. Victor Williams, will you please come up? And we just have the microphone on the stand this time. I'll let you stand up here and address your questions. Actually, they're going to hand it to you. Good. And Mr. Jenkins will be the first one to answer this question.
Good evening. I grew up in Anniston, right on 15th Street. So in the 54 years that I've grown, Anniston is my home. I look at Anniston the way I see it right now. There's division, there's miscommunication, there's no guidance. As a councilman, we should see West Anniston, South Anniston, East Anniston, Fort McClellan, North Anniston as a city. Having traveled around the world, this used to be a steel mecca back when I was growing up. I used to see Anniston, Alabama on steel pipes as I traveled. What, if anything, are you going to do to bring the focus back to the community to where we are a city, not a ward?
I'm glad you asked that question. Ward mentality that exists within our city is as divisive as any one thing that goes on here. This idea that I've got to defend my ward. I presented the questions in the questionnaire that was sent to us that were ward specific. I understand that I'm elected by the residents of Ward 1. I also understand that I am elected to serve the entire city. If I choose to serve Ward 1, then we might as well secede from the city and start our own city. It doesn't work. If we cannot work together, there are varying needs in varying locations within the city. It is up to the city council to recognize individuals on the council to bring their issues from their specific wards together for a collective discussion and solution. We have got to work together. The ward mentality is terrible. And I have done everything I can to resist that in every way.
Thank you. And Mr. Hadley, the same question to you about serving the city and not specifically just Ward 1.
Okay. I look at this ward situation as a way of communicating. One person has a certain limit of how many people they can communicate with in any given period of time. So you break the city into wards. You have communication areas. That communication is really, it's needed in order to be able to even have communication. Given that, if you have a goal that's common to all the wards, and the city is common, right? That gives us now a focal point. We have a vision. That vision needs to be accountable to the city and the citizens. And once you go with a vision and you have a strategy, now you can be like a football team. You've got to have players that understand the plays, they can communicate, and they have a common goal. They want to win, right? We need to get our citizens to the point where we're all pushing the same way. Our council needs to have one voice. There needs to be leadership. That football team can't function without a good leader, right? So we need to continue with this process of communicating and following that one path. And there needs to be a system of rewards. We as citizens need to see results. We need to see that by us working together, we're going to achieve something that's good for all of us, not just one ward or another. Downtown is centrally located. If downtown flourishes, the surrounding areas will benefit by some of those things. Then it can move out. It may be a catalyst point, but eventually we want all of Anniston to have retail and not have vacant spaces. We have to do it a little at a time. And I'd say that's the process that we need to keep using. It works for business, it works for industry, it's worked for our country.
Thank you. And now we're going to ask Sam Phillips, who represents the Get Moving organization, to ask his question. Mr. Phillips.
Just like technology, bikes are here to stay. What is your take on the Ladiga Trail? Do you support the construction of it? Family construction?
Yes, Mr. Hadley will answer that one first.
The Ladiga Trail is probably one of the greatest assets that Anniston has. And that Ladiga Trail connects a number of cities. Goes all the way to the Georgia border. That connection brings in communication, but it also transfers funds from Georgia to Anniston, because that money travels that trail. The individuals that have the bike repairs, sell the bikes, maintain bikes, they benefit from that Ladiga Trail. That trail can also go to Coldwater Mountain. It could go south to Oxford. Unfortunately, it stops at Weaver right now. We need to make a concerted effort to look at getting those easements back from the owners and let that Ladiga Trail go through Anniston, go behind the museums, go to the railroad station, and then go on through to Oxford. Again, that link is going to create wealth. There's a lot of people that come to Anniston for the bike races. Again, every year these things have gotten bigger and bigger. That brings in revenue. But on top of revenue, it brings recognition of what Anniston is, what the restaurants can do, what the taverns can do, what the lodgings do. And we need to make sure we monopolize on that and keep pushing our strengths. Those strengths can help support us while we get the other areas built up that may not be so strong. So the Ladiga is a key component of our vision for economic development and for our revenue stream, and eventually getting more revenue in that we need to tax our citizens with.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. And now, Mr. Jenkins, your take on the Ladiga Trail.
The Ladiga Trail, we missed a great opportunity when Norfolk Southern offered us the property. It's a shame. It's a solvable problem. We got a grant recently to begin the necessary research to purchase back the property. We've had a number of individuals. The city owns a good portion of that property. The county owns portions of that property. We've had a number of individuals that have already come forth and said they want to give the property back. They don't have any use for it. I think that there are 72 different property owners, incidentally, from Michael Tucker Park to the multimodal station on 4th Street. We're working diligently to recover all of those properties so we can extend it in. I think it's vital. I do agree and have recently passed a resolution to require the city to investigate the opportunity for bike pedestrian routes throughout the city. We need north, south, east, west access. The Ladiga Trail is unique in reaches every segment of our population. Old, young, thin, fat, it doesn't matter. We can all maneuver down the grades of a formal rail bed. It's a level, easy slope. Coldwater Mountain biking trails are a different animal. They're very technical in a lot of ways. Now, there's some easy trails up there too. We need to be able to connect to those, but that's targeting a different audience. Ladaga is our greatest asset. We've got to be able to reach it. I agree with Mr. Hatley. We need to be able to spur off of Ladaga into McClellan. We need to be able to spur off into the museums. We need to give the destination point. Ladaga doesn't stop at the Georgia line. It stops being called Ladaga at the Georgia line. It turns into the Silver Comet Trail, and it goes all the way into Midtown in Atlanta. There's no reason that somebody can't get on a bike in Atlanta and travel all the way to Anniston. They will come, they'll spend the weekend, they'll spend their dollars, and they'll go home. We've got to provide a place for them. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Dixon. Now I'm going to call on Sharon Reed from Women Empowered, and she will ask a question, and Mr. Jenkins, it will go to you first.
Good evening. What community service have you provided to enhance the growth of Anniston?
I'm active in a number of community service directions. I serve on the Museum Endowment Board. I have a 6-year member of Habitat for Humanity's board. I served as their construction coordinator for a period of 2 years, which meant I was on job sites every Saturday directing the construction of the homes. I serve on the Boy Scout, Executive Council for the Boy Scout Board, active in that participation. Annually, I teach kids the benefits of green architecture through the County Extension Office via Earth Day. I go into the schools on a regular basis and give instructional talks on what it's like to be an architect and what it's like to move into that profession. So I stay active. I coach soccer. Coached 2 teams of soccer for the last 9 years. I currently coach a travel squad. So I stay active with the kids. I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. Staying active with the youth and within the community is paramount to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Hatley, the same question. Your civic involvement to make Anniston a better place.
Okay, recently I've been active in attending the meetings at the MPO area where they actually worked on that plan for the bicycle. And I was just a volunteer person in that effort. Recently also I worked with YMCA, the scholarship fund. That was earlier this week. We raised $160,000. And that was a fund for children in Anniston that can't afford those kind of things. So that was a very good process. I was councilman of Ward 1 in 96 to 2000. We left the city in good shape, very little debt. I was on the school board in 1995 as a member, and on the water board in 1995 as a member. In the past, I was a Sonoma Club member in Aiken, South Carolina. Went through the chairs, president, board, Sonoma Man of the Year. I was a member here at Anniston at the Sonoma Club whenever I came here. I've been in public education 11 years. And dealing with dual enrollment, working with high schools, trying to get counselors, teachers, parents involved in the technology area in terms of skills. When I was on the council years ago, Fort McClellan was in the process of being annexed into Anniston. That occurred. We annexed Coldwater Mountain, Blue Water Mountain. Refurbished the city hall instead of rebuilding a new hall. And the city had some $16 million in the bank when we left.
Thank you. That concludes the questions from the 3 organizations. We have just a couple of minutes left, so we're going to go back to one more question here, a general question from both of you.
I think one of those short-term goals. We talk about short-term and long-term. It has to occur almost immediately after this council gets in. And that image is improved by the constituents, the citizens, residents, seeing that we have a council that talks with one voice. We have a council that listens to its citizens. And we have a council that's proactive in some vision that we all know about and know the direction that we want to go in. And that needs to occur through communication skills. Not all individuals understand communication. In a business world, you have to learn those things. There are classes you can take, very short classes. But communication is sending a signal, having the right medium for that signal so it's understood, and getting feedback coming back. That doesn't always happen instantaneously. Sometimes you have to take a formal course or have an instructor that teaches us how to do those things. The council needs to go off on a short retreat, learn those skills, learn the Robert's Rules of Order, how to conduct a meeting efficiently, how to be consistent in those rules. At that same time, we'll learn each other's personalities. We'll learn our strengths and weaknesses. We'll learn how to communicate one-on-one. Some individuals have a hot button. If you learn those hot buttons, you don't have to push those hot buttons on those individuals. That may help a lot in keeping things under control. But as individuals work together, and all of you have been in that situation, you start becoming more efficient. You start learning how each other operates, what your needs are. And as that efficiency increases, the population will see that also. And they'll begin to trust the council and understand the council is doing what's good for Anniston and its citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Hatton. And now, Mr. Jenkins. The same question for you. How do you improve the public image of both the city council and the city as a whole?
I would like to believe that I've begun to take steps to improve the image of the city council. It can't be about arguing with one another. We're not one voice. We're not going to agree on everything out there. We shouldn't. We didn't all come from the same place. We don't all see the same things. It's important that we hear each other, that we listen to each other, that we communicate with one another, and that we show each other the due respect that each of us deserve. Because you don't agree with my point of view is no reason to lash out. As I have not lashed out at anybody for not agreeing with me, it gets us nowhere. I would encourage everybody on the council. I agree with the retreat idea. Every other city I know of does that at the start of it. It defines goals, sets priorities. It takes a lot of the big figuring out. It solves a lot of problems. When I first got on the council, meetings ran 2.5 to 3 hours. If you've been to a council meeting lately, you'll find out that they run 40 to 45 minutes. We take care of business. We're efficient. We have discussion. We don't all agree. It's fine. Majority rules, we move forward. There is no more petty bickering going on up there. It's got to stop. We've got to work together. Thank you.
And thank you. Let's give these candidates a